Hey guys, it's Marty and welcome to Two Line Slot Cars. We are going to tune the Revoslot Toyota GT-1. Picked this up from Cincy Slots. I am in love with it. The livery is great. The colors are great. They're golf colors. Yeah, I could probably find some golf decals to put on it if I really wanted to, but the fit and finish is so great. Really impressed with this. But I'm going to do my baseline tuning, maybe do a couple of extra things that I did with my GT2, Porsche 911 GT2 in the Repsol livery. This car runs really well. I did realize that this car is missing one of the chassis screws, and I ran it the entire month like that. It ran pretty good. So we'll see. This time, we'll try not to do that. We'll run all four. How's that? So let's see if we can take this from straight out of the box, running 5.8s, 5.9s, which rubber tires on my track, straight out of the box, done nothing to the car. That's actually pretty good, which gets me excited because this means there's a lot of potential in this car. There are lots of people who do lots of different things. This isn't the end-all, be-all tuning. I know that there are guys that tune way better than I do. I see it every week when we run at the track. Think we can get this running a little better. Okay, shot from above. Like most Revo slots, you can loosen these long body screws that they have and not take the screws all the way out, that you can pull the body apart and take the body off without backing these screws all the way out. Let's see if we can do that without breaking anything. There we go. Okay. I will give Revoslot and Alan from 132 Slot Cars some credit. They did announce that some of these cars have a problem with the front wheels and grub screws, that they put the wrong grub screw in and wheels were flying off on the track. I don't know that I have that problem, but we'll tear it apart and see and take a look. The body itself, Lexan, pretty lightweight, but I will say that it's a sturdy body. It's not flimsy, but man, the fit and finish, just look at that. And I'm not sure that the colors are, from that camera and the lighting. I mean, this is way more orange. It looks red to me on the screen. Maybe that's my monitor. Take a look at it. Typical Revo. Really well made. It does come with a wood guide, so we will be putting the wood guide on. I do have a set of silicones that came off of the 911. I will be getting a new pair of silicone tires for this car. That will be the first things to go. So we might as well just go ahead and put the silicones on. These are Super Tire. Really a big fan of Super Tire. Their tire really hooks up well on the plastic track. I'm just super happy with them. So now there are people who will true these. Probably everyone who finishes ahead of me probably trues their tires, their rear silicone tires. It's a lot of work, and I don't know. People say that it makes a big difference. I guess I've driven cars with trued silicones, and I've driven cars with just new, fresh silicones, and I feel like it's very close to the same experience. Okay, there we go. Got new tires on it. Now, when I look at this, I will want to true these fronts so I can get the nose down slightly. The guide is spring-loaded. Now, I will tell you that I usually take the spring out of the guide. So the guide takes a 1.5 hex. So let's do this so you can actually see it. The front end is really nice, to be honest with you. I really love the quality of these cars. But there is a spring. I typically remove the spring. When I put the wood guide in, I do not put the spring back in, mainly because I run on plastic tracks that don't have a lot of elevation change. after you true the tires, it puts it just doesn't, I don't feel like it's needed. Now, your situation might be different. I would normally put new copper braid. I like to use the slotted braid, but I can't find mine. It might be because my brother has them. So let's take the wood guide out. We'll reuse this braid. I'm not a big fan of the Revoslot braid that it comes on it. It's just a little too stiff for me, but we will reuse it. But as you can see, it's just a little deeper guide. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but it is deeper. So we like to use it on the plastic track. It really does a great job. No, I mean, I guess I could put the spring on and just compress it, but it would act like a spacer. Let's see if it puts the guide too deep. It might put the guide right where I want it. But I will tighten it down so that the guide can move and turn, but no real up and down movement. Let's see how that is. Okay, can move, but there's really no up and down movement. That's kind of how I like it. When we look at that, my Revoslots, I like for the fronts to be planted, so that actually works out well. Let's see if we can get them back in this guy. That might be the challenge. Just try to flatten that out best that you can to go down in. I might have a better shot of getting, try not to destroy the braid. There we go. Just one side. In. Let's go ahead and braid pushed out just slightly. I think it should be all right. We'll test it once we get it on the track. You can always come back. Maybe I should speed this part of the video up. Okay, braids are back in. How do I like it? Okay, good. So there's the basics. Gear mesh is really, really good, straight from the factory. So I'm just going to hit the bearings with some oil, real lightly. A little goes a long way, because the oil will collect dirt. So I try to go pretty light, just a tiny little drop on all the bearings. I will do the same on the motor. Okay. The other thing I will do is I will put some silicone grease on the spur and pinion. So I have a little bit of some silicone grease and some graphite concoction that I kind of put together that my friend John Albright told me about, and it helps really smooth out some gears without being too aggressive. A little of this goes a long way. Q-tip that I have laying around to put some on the spur gear, and then what we'll do is we'll just kind of work that in and let it move around a little bit. It doesn't take a whole lot, but the graphite will smooth things out. But the gear mesh is really good. This should run in pretty quick. The car was not loud, not too loud. Now, the other thing, work that oil into that bearings. Nice. Boy, I like that. Look at this front spin. Very good. Very good. Again, this is just my baseline tuning. There are some other things that I'll do probably later to possibly get the car a little lower. The one thing I do like, a lot of people like to put tape in between the two pieces of chassis where they connect. I've kind of switched doing that. I've switched over to using the silicone grease. And I'm using the Super Lube silicone grease. The problem is I don't want to drop the brass. I've lost one in my last car, so I got to be really careful. And when you do this, it might be easier just to do it one at a time. The other thing you'll want is just a touch of thread lock, because once you loosen these to take the chassis apart, the screws will back out. So put a little drop of thread lock. This is the Loctite medium strength, the 243. The other thing you can use is fingernail polish. So what I'll do is I want to put between where the chassis meets, the top plate and the motor plate meet, I want to put a little bit of grease in there. Really the only way to do that is to take it apart. I've tried to squeeze grease in there, and I just kind of make a mess, to be honest. As you can see now, I've taken the chassis apart. You've got two plates. What we want to do is make sure that this plate is flat. I should probably take front axle apart to do this too. I think I've got the front end that has an issue, because what they said is they come with conical grub screws. Let's see if it'll focus on that. And there's just not enough threads with these wheels. So I probably should contact Revoslot Alan and say, hey, I think I need that. So let's check the chassis. So you can see my setup block should be, and there's some movement. This chassis is not completely flat. Now, that's just part of the manufacturing process. Actually, if I take the screws are probably what are causing that. So I would say that my chassis plate is flat. Now, since I'm already down to this point, if I were thinking of lowering the chassis, right now would be the time to do it because I already have it apart. So these axle towers, you can shim them to get, because there's no adjustment for the front axle, you can shim these towers up using a small shim that you would use for your axles. So like that's a 1,000th, and this is like a 4,000th axle shim. This has got a little bit of thickness. And so you could adjust just how low that we should probably see how it performs. You do know the closer you can get to the track, still meet the minimum standards of your track rules. That's the key. You want to stay within the rules. I'm not going to do that. While I've got this apart, I want at each of these connection points to put a little bit of super lube. And I'm not going to use the special formula with graphite. I could, but I don't want it to be too messy. So I'm just put a little bit on the Q-tip. Each of these points where I know that the chassis is going to connect, I'm going to put some lube at each of those points. And that will it'll do two things. It'll let that chassis move freely. And I guess I could have used some oil. I just think the lithium grease sticks around, dry out. The silicone grease, sorry. Although I think you can use lithium grease. I know that move freely, and it will dampen some of the noise. Because the one thing you get with the Revoslot is you get some chassis noise. Now, you can also, if you need to soften that chassis up a bit, you can always use some tape on the bottom. Sometimes that might tighten your chassis up a little too much. So now we need to put this back together. Let's go ahead and put the guide back together. Let's put this chassis back together. And this is the part that makes me nervous because I don't want to drop these, because I don't have extras. There's no movement. because that one's out of alignment. There are holes that those brass nuts fit down in. Not too tight. Make sure that the chassis is still moving. Okay, we want to check the movement. I think we got some movement. Let's compare it to the movement I have here. It's pretty good. Nothing is too tight. Not a lot of movement in the back. Moves up just a touch. I'm kind of liking that. It's got some movement. Can always be adjusted. So what I'm going to do is just put a tiny, tiny touch. Again, a little goes a long way. Right down on top of that. Oh man, a little too much. And that'll seep down in and dry. So we'll let that dry and come back in a second. Ready to continue tuning the Revoslot GT-1. Chassis is back together. Got the thread lock on it. I've got the chassis movement I'm looking for. Since I've got it apart, I was doing some measuring. Rules at Cincy Slots say that you can't touch the track. The chassis may not touch the track on the straights. This is true for all classes. I know that some others are suggested ride height is 0.04 of an inch or 1.09 millimeters when set on a flat setup block. So what we're shooting for is 1.09. Right now, I should probably put the front axle back in just to make sure that that doesn't change the overall ride height. So spacer, wheel, tire. All right, so I'm going to take my calipers, measure the ride height. Now, I don't have a feeler gauge or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is so when I measure this out, we are right there in its stock configuration at 1.09 millimeters from the setup block. So we should be pretty good to meet the requirements of the rules. So, and that's what we want. We want to make sure that we are always following the track rules. When you follow the track rules, what I've discovered, what little racing I've done, but what I have discovered is that following the track rules tends to keep the peace and cut down on any arguing and it creates a great, fun racing environment. I know that sounds silly, but just this past week at the track, we heard stories about guys really stretching the rules, and it created some awkward tension, and somebody was asked to not come back to a track, and that's honestly, it's sad. It shouldn't happen. We're adults, and we're playing with toy cars. Now, would I get upset if I found somebody was cheating? Yes. I would be upset about that because I try to follow the rules, and I know that 99% of the people out there do as well. And so let's just follow the rules, have fun racing, keep the atmosphere just great. So there's the baseline tuning. The only thing that I have not done is true these fronts. Now, I don't have a truer that can handle the axle size for the Revoslots. So to true these, what I would do is take these rear tires off, put the fronts on the rears, hook this up to my power supply, and then use an emery board or the sanding block from my tire truer. And with the fronts, you're just wanting to make sure that they're round. It's set up pretty good. So we're going to just, before we do the fronts, we're going to do some testing on the track. So let's go out. Let's button this thing up. We've got it ready and see what kind of improvement we have with just the baseline tuning. So let's hit the track. So there you have it, testing and tuning the Revoslot Toyota GT-1. I really, really like this car. 51427. 51427 was the fast lap. That is down, I mean, that's down 7.5 tenths, almost 8 tenths of a second, just with some basic level tuning. There's still some more to get out of this car, I believe. Once the motor gets some laps on it, broke in really well, the gear mesh really smooth. Still need to true the fronts. I think that will pick up just a touch. They don't need much. They're in pretty good shape, but I just make sure that they're round and they roll well. Also, one thing I didn't mention is that I hit the guide with some sandpaper because the wood guide, as is, will rub the bottom of the track in the slot for Carrera. So you'll get a little click-clack. And what I do is basically just round that front nose just a touch and sand the guide slightly. And that click sound goes away and really quiets down. So great, great car. If you're thinking about getting a Revoslot Toyota GT-1, totally recommend it. They're a great looking car. I think they're going to be so much fun to race against each other. And in just the general Revoslot class, I think they're going to be very, very competitive. Right now, at that time, 51427. It's my fastest Revoslot that I own. It's faster than my 333 SP, and it's faster than my 911 GT3 by a couple tenths. This is a quick car. I love it. Again, we're going to search for some more speed out of it, but I think we are really, really close. I think we can be very, very competitive as is. You saw what I did to the car. It didn't take much to get that much improvement. Really big change. Great to drive, fun to drive. You can really dive into a corner because of their weight. They hold really well. They will compensate for some mistakes as when you're driving. Go have some fun with it. If you like this kind of content, hit the subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, hit the bell so you get notified anytime I put out new content. Guys, this has been great. Hopefully you will take your Toyota GT-1. Guys, thanks for tuning in this week, and go have fun racing.